nice application, but it's not unique. Diba? I have it on my phone. I don't use it. I use Instagram. I prefer Instagram. It's got more filters and things like that. But I mean, I have it. I don't use it. Okay, so I've established that there are few applications by Filipinos, and they're really shallow. Okay, in the other room is this talk about thesis for students. Okay, by the way, if you're supposed to be in that room, then that's the room about thesis. Okay, the reason that exists, year after year, we'd always get requests at this time of the year from students. The question is, anong magandang thesis project? Okay. I've talked to some professors about this. I also talked in UP, in the class of Romel Feria, about thesis development also. And his complaint is that a lot of students provide really shallow thesis proposals. Okay, what are the applications that students do? They do, can you guess? Did you ever do thesis in school for computer projects?
Payroll.
Payroll, okay. Payroll, school registration, library system, things that, inventory, warehouse inventory, I've seen that so many times as proposals for thesis. Okay, exact, classic. Okay, year after year, that's what students think about. Okay, or they'll think of they'll tie up with some NGO and try to do some interesting thing like that. Hook up with the DENR and come up with some forestry plant registration system where you can find what plants are or in what region of the Philippines, so something like that. Sounds challenging, but it's still ultimately mababaw. So there's something wrong. Okay, what's it with applications in the Philippines? Oops. So where are the Filipino developers? Based on some data provided by Microsoft, also, according to Microsoft, there are 47,000 professional developers in the Philippines. These are professionals, so these do not include those in school. So there are around 15. There are 300,000 IT students, infrastructure and development. Okay, who may or may not pursue an IT career after graduation. Of these 47,000, it depends unless you consider call center industry as IT. 15,000 of these 47,000 are identified as enterprise developers in known independent software vendors, or the remaining 32K are undefined. Okay, so let's just use this. Okay, we know that there are a lot of Filipino developers out there. Now, how good are Filipino developers? Would you say you guys, are you good at what you do? Come on, have some pride. Are you good at what you do?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'd be surprised if anyone said no. Okay. Okay, here are some things that, as I've talked to several people in industries, and I've also talked to some IT guys in CIOs in companies about this. Filipino developers are very good. Okay, so let's stick with that as a premise. Okay, Filipino developers are very good, very analytical. They can code properly with the right algorithms, etc. Okay, but majority of our developers work in outsourced development houses like Accenture. Okay, there are wherever you work. Okay, there are all of these outsourced development entities. They do projects from the US, etc. Okay, and they're working on someone else's design. So, what does that mean? Okay, like for example, the thousands that work in Accenture. Who here work for Accenture, by the way? Okay, so FYI, what do? They locally they do applications from customers of Accenture, like in the US or in Europe, etc. So they code it here, they do it here. Okay, someone else's specifications. Okay, and developers in most companies are that. They're given specifications from someone and they write the application. What does that mean? While Filipinos are very good at what they do, a lot of Philippine developers don't conceptualize the application from the beginning. What is the business problem, or in this case, what is the game that you want to do, etc., and then you actually code it. You're already told, this is how the game's supposed to work, this is how the application's supposed to work, there are different sections, etc. Let's code to achieve this. Okay, this is the interesting reality that I've encountered. So when you go back to the beginning, okay, yes, Filipinos are very good, recognized worldwide as an outsourcing center for development. So let's go to another country. Singapore. In Singapore, the application development houses there, they think differently. Okay, I don't know if it's because of school or it's just the way that Singaporeans think, but they think differently. They don't necessarily think better than us, but they think differently. So, I talked with a friend of mine who deals with companies that do application development. Yeah, because they're promoting this thing in Singapore. But let's have Singapore applications, etc. So, according to him, there's this company that, okay, it's owned by this Singaporean who has really great ideas. Okay, so he wants to translate this into an application. So what does he do? According to him, he does not like Singaporean developers. For whatever reason, let's not put into that. He doesn't like dealing with Indian developers. Okay, according to him, Singaporeans and Indians, when you give them specifications, they'll stick to those specifications. Okay, not necessarily a bad thing, but so his applications are outsourced to Filipino developers. Okay, so he loves Filipino developers. Why? Because Filipino developers, aside from working on specifications, will go the extra mile and give suggestions, etc., over functionalities, things like that. Okay, so that's what he does. So again, in the end, what is the application? It's Singaporean. It's coded by Filipino developers, but it's a Singaporean idea. Okay. Factor in all of those games appearing on the iPhone and Android by companies in the US, which are actually coded by Filipino developers. And there are thousands of these. So when I go back to the question of how many applications in iTunes or in Android Marketplace are actually Filipino, it's one of those Hilaw type, they're conceived by an American or a European, etc., but they're coded by Filipinos. Okay, so that's what we'd like to change. Okay, so that's what my advocacy is all about. Promoting, changing this paradigm of, okay, Filipino developers are just code monkeys. You're familiar with the term? Okay? Not to be insulting, but it's a reality. Okay? So, to be able to come up with real Filipino apps, we have to think in that entrepreneurial level, that entrepreneurial spirit of what kind of applications can I do which is really interesting, na hindi kinopya sa ibang application. Okay. Bearing that in mind, there are three elements that are common when I researched about this. When talking to people, reading about it, there are three different elements. We've got the developer, obviously technically proficient to do the actual coding. Okay, but we don't want to leave it there. There's the businessman or the idea guy. Okay, the idea guy may not be a coder. Okay, the idea guy is the one who conceives the entire application from start to finish. So if it's a business application, for example, if you're doing an accounting application, you need an accountant type person, right? If you're doing a game application, I guess you need a gamer, but then you'd have to think of the whole thing from start to finish. Diba? Doing a game idea is not simple. Diba? It has to have certain elements of it being challenging, etc. You've got goals that you get for within the game, etc. Which, when you talk about the idea person, let's face it, when you're a businessman, for example, developers are not business-minded. Those, don't be insulted by those that are developers that have their own companies. But it's a thing that when you come to conceptualize things, yes, they're very analytical, you give them a set of specifications, but when you talk about the whole breadth of the applications, developers are trained to be developers, businessmen are trained to be businessmen. And then there's a third element, okay, here, a designer type person with a certain level of creativity. This is this right brain, left brain type thing, okay? So applications also have to look nice, have to have a good user interface. There are several applications out there which are very good at what they do, but they're so hard to use and they're so goddamn ugly. Are you aware of an ERP application known as SAP? It's an application used by businesses, by companies for things from accounting, purchasing, sales, so forth and so on. So it's this big business application. Okay. Part of my history, I used to be with SAP. Long ago, everyone would buy SAP. Diba? In the Philippines, San Miguel was the first company. It's used by San Miguel, Ayala, Globe, Smart. Practically every major business in the Philippines is using SAP. Okay, but way back in the early 90s, application was so, one, hard to use, and two, so goddamn ugly. Okay, so the old business owners loved it because of the results it gave. The users hated it because it was so hard to use, and it was so goddamn ugly. Okay, what's the point? Let's go to the mobile application space. Some platforms, like Windows Phone, have very specific specifications over the UI, okay, which is good. Okay, same with Apple. You flip to the open world of Android. There are no such rules. So what does that mean? You go to the Android. Who here has an Android phone? Okay, so you can relate to this. You go through the Android marketplace. You look for a lesser known application. Okay, you forget the Facebook application, the Foursquare application, etc. You look for a lesser known application. It's just something really cute, etc. A lot of Android applications are very goddamn ugly. They're hard to use because there's no commonality in its ano. So some they really good input, but it's so ugly. You go to iTunes. Okay, Apple applications are beautiful. Okay, let's admit it. They are beautiful. They're nice to look at. Even that graphic you see on iTunes, which entices you to buy the application, is so beautiful. So what do people do? They buy the application, later on finding out that it's crap. I've been a victim of that. I bought nice-looking applications that don't do anything. Well, they do something, but they don't do it very well. Okay, but nabili. See, so don't forget that it has to look good, especially today, diba? Gone are the loyalty of users. If it's nice to look at, if it's like for example, in the iPhone there are a lot of camera applications that in the end do the same thing, but some are nicer than others. They're cuter. They seem to be easier to use than other applications. So bear in mind, the end result is the same, pero because of the user interface and just the way that it's graphically designed, makes it something that someone would want to buy, something would like to use, diba? Same with anything. Diba? If you go into any marketplace, you look at an application which looks nicer than the other, you'd go with the one that looks nicer, which might be even slightly functionally deficient, pero ang gandang tignan eh. It's human nature. Okay, it's a psychology behind it. So you have to have these three elements in place. So, if you are going to develop an application, you might want to consider partnering up with other folks that are strong in other areas. Okay, so for example, you have a really good concept. Let's say you've tackled the first two. Okay, pero are you artistic enough to implement what you want? Maybe not. Maybe you can partner with a friend who's a designer, diba, that would make the interface really good, thus making it easier to use and easier to sell in the end. So have these three elements in place. Okay, it's not just about coding. You have to think of the logic and you have to make it look nice. Okay, that's just a reality. Okay, there's three kinds of applications. Obviously, you're here specifically for one thing, but as I'm generically talking about mobile applications, one is the content type application.